brahmacharya. And of course, it is also understood that one should not be homosexual and etc. etc. This yogi should sit, withdrawing his mind from sense objects, thinking of my beautiful form with 4 arms, having me alone as the goal. So there are conditions. So one should meditate on the 4-armed Vishnu form, and one should surrender to Paramatma while practicing yoga. The goal of life is to know Krishna, who is situated within the heart of everything as Paramatma, the 4-handed Vishnu form. The yoga process is practiced in order to discover and see this localized form of Vishnu, and not for any other purpose. The localized Vishnu Murti is the plenary representation of Krishna dwelling within one's heart. One who has no program to realize this Vishnu Murti is uselessly engaged in mock yoga practice and is certainly wasting his time. Krishna is the ultimate goal of life, and the Vishnu Murti situated in one's heart is the object of yoga practice. To realize this Vishnu Murti within the heart, one has to observe complete abstinence from sex life. Therefore, one has to leave home and live alone in a secluded place, remaining seated as mentioned above. One cannot enjoy sex life daily at home or elsewhere and attend a so-called yoga class and thus become a yogi. One has to practice controlling the mind and avoiding all kinds of sense gratification, of which sex life is achieved. In the rules of celibacy written by the great sage Yagyavalkya, it is said, Karmanam anasavasa sarvavastasu sarvada sarvatra maithunat tyago brahmacharyam prachakshate. The vow of brahmacharya is meant to help one completely abstain from sex indulgence in work, words, and mind at all times, under all circumstances, and in all places. No one can perform correct yoga practice through sex indulgence. Actually, those who are studying Vedanta Darshan, those who are studying the scriptures that teach love of Godhead or liberation, they need to maintain absolute celibacy, not even just restricted celibacy or restricted sex life. Brahmacharya is taught, therefore, from childhood, when one has no knowledge of sex life. Children at the age of 5 are sent to the Gurukula, or the place of the spiritual master, and the master trains the young boys in the strict discipline of becoming brahmacharis. In today's world, this concept is very severely criticized and condemned, that you're not allowing the children to think on their own and come up with their own decision on what they want to do in their life. But in the Vedic method, we go with another principle, param drishtva nivartate. Give them a higher taste, then you can save them from lower tastes. Without such practice, no one can make advancement in any yoga, whether it be dhyana, jnana, or bhakti. One who, however, follows the rules and regulations of married life, having a sexual relationship only with his wife, and that also under regulation, is also called a brahmachari. Such a restrained householder brahmachari may be accepted in the bhakti school, but the jnana and dhyana schools do not even admit householder brahmacharis. They require complete abstinence without compromise. In the bhakti school, a householder brahmachari is allowed controlled sex life because the cult of bhakti yoga is so powerful that one automatically loses sexual attraction, being engaged in the superior service of the Lord. That is because in the bhakti school, I already pointed out that until one comes to the point of full satiation, full detachment, or until one comes to the point of full faith in the process of devotional service, one is supposed to engage in one's material duties. So which means that it is second stage. It is either second stage devotional service, pradhanibhuta bhakti, maximized bhakti, or it is the first stage, minimal bhakti. Minimal bhakti is anyway considered karma yoga. And then you enter into bhakti yoga gradually, you move up. So because the process is on how to increase your engagement in Navavidha Bhakti, therefore they quickly, at the speed at which they are progressing, they will also develop, they'll develop pure or higher desires. In the Bhakti school, okay. is so powerful that one automatically loses sexual attraction being engaged in the superior service of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said, Vishaya vinivartante nirahara dehina rasavajam rasopyasya param drishtva nivartate. Whereas others are forced to restrain themselves from sense gratification. A devotee of the Lord automatically refrains because of superior taste. Other than the devotee, no one has any information of that superior taste. But whether one spontaneously gives up activities which are self-destructive, or whether one manually gives up, somehow or other we need to give up. Because you cannot have both. You cannot experience the bliss of Brahman realization or Paramatma realization or Bhagavan realization on one hand, and at the same time try to experience material happiness. Therefore, Ahara Nidra Bhaya Maithuna has to be given up. Prabhupada says that ultimately we want to come to the point where we give up all these four activities. And this is the very foundation of material, other forms of variegated self-enjoyment. And in that also, there is an order in which we give up. First, Maithuna is given up. Then Bhaya is given up. Bhaya refers to fear, including fear of financial security. If I don't do certain activities, how will I get money? How will I survive? So that fear. Next, it is taken out in that way, one by one. Then Nidra, then Ahara. The six Goswamis, they have demonstrated that it is possible. Normally, we will tend to think that these cannot be given up. These are essential, fundamental human requirements. But the six Goswamis have demonstrated that Nidra, Ahara, Vihara, Kadi, Vijitav. That was a big surprise for me. That when I was introduced to Krishna consciousness, when I was reading Prabhupada's books, that the Goswamis even gave up eating and sleeping. In the other Vaishnava lines also, we come across strict practitioners, but to give up even eating and sleeping and engage in Haribhakti, that is something. Vigata Bhi. One cannot be fearless unless one is fully in Krishna consciousness. The conditioned soul is fearful due to his perverted memory, his forgetfulness of his eternal relationship with Krishna. The Bhagavatam says, Bhayam Dvitiya Niveshatasyat Ishatapetasya Vipariyo Smriti. Krishna consciousness is the only basis for fearlessness. Therefore, perfect practice is possible for a person who is Krishna conscious. And since the ultimate goal of yoga practice is to see the Lord within, the Krishna conscious person is already the best of all yogis. The principles of the yoga system mentioned herein are different from those of the popular so-called yoga societies. Yoga is very popular in today's world. One day of the year is called World Yoga Day also. Okay, text 15.
Thus, by practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activity, the mystic transcendent with mind regulated, attained the kingdom of God or the abode of Krishna by physical or natural existence.
What then happens to the person sitting in this manner? Sri Baladeva remarks, the yogi who daily offers his self to the process, that means who is offering himself, which means that he is interested in self-realization, as distinct from, he wants to realize that he is not the body and then realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead also, who has unwavering consciousness because of purification from contact with me, attains a bliss which is inferior to liberation and which is dependent on me. The Shruti says, knowing him, one surpasses death. One surpasses death means one surpasses repeated death. Nirvana Paramam Shantim means the happiness inferior to liberation. This indicates that the siddhis are supernatural power. This indicates the siddhis are supernatural powers, which are results of yoga. So when one performs, one attains all of this. That's one meaning. Practicing yoga in this way, the yogi stops the mental functions acting in relation to matter. If there is no lack of absorption in bhakti, gradually the yogi attains supreme peace of nirvana situated in me, that is, liberation from matter and this attainment of the spiritual nature. Prabhupada, can someone read out his purport?
The ultimate goal in practicing yoga is now clearly explained. Yoga practice is not meant for attaining any kind of material facility. We should enable the cessation of all material existence. One seeks an improvement in health or aspires after material perfection is no duty according to Bhagavad Gita. Not the cessation of material existence entails one entering into the void. It is only there is no void anywhere within the creation of the Lord. Rather, the cessation of material existence enables one to enter into the spiritual sky, the abode of the Lord. The abode of the Lord is also clearly described in the Bhagavad Gita as that place where there is no need of sun, moon, or electricity. All the planets in the spiritual kingdom are self-illuminated like the sun illuminated the sky. The kingdom of God is everywhere, but the spiritual sky and the planets thereof are called Paramdham, or superior abodes. A consummate yogi who is perfect in understanding Lord Krishna, as is clearly stated here in the himself, Mat Chittaha Mat Paraha Mat Anam, can attain real peace and can ultimately reach his supreme abode Krishna Loka, known as Goloka Vrindavan. In the Brahma Samhita 5.37 it is clearly stated, Goloka Vrindavan Kilatma Bhutaha. The Lord, although residing always in his abode called Goloka, with the all-pervading Brahman and the localized Paramatma as well by dint of his superior spiritual elements. No one can reach the spiritual sky Vaikuntha or enter into the Lord's eternal abode, Goloka Vrindavan, without the proper understanding of Krishna and his plenary expansion Vishnu. Therefore, the person working in Krishna consciousness is the perfect yogi, because his mind is always absorbed in Krishna's activities. Savai Mana Krishna Pada in the Vedas also, Siddhartha 3.8, some able believe to watch the one can overcome the path of birth and death only by understanding the supreme personality of Krishna. In other words, perfection of the yoga system is the attainment of freedom from material existence and not from medical, jugglery, or gymnastic feats to be full innocent people.
So Prabhupada is talking of the ultimate goal of practicing yoga. The ultimate goal of practicing yoga is nirvana paramam, cessation of material existence, transcendental cessation of material existence. And Sri Varadev Vidyabhushan is talking of the immediate attainment. What does he immediately attain? He attains something inferior to liberation. What does he ultimately attain? He ultimately attains liberation from material existence. So both the renditions are okay. Text 16.
Pratyasnagas atu yogi asti nachai kantam atatnata nachati swapnati gasya jagrato naiva tarjuna. There is no possibility of one becoming a yogi, O Arjuna, if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough.
Sri Varadev Vidyabhushan. Two verses describe the restrictions for the person practicing yoga. For one, eating too much or not eating enough. For one, sleeping too much or not sleeping enough. Yoga is not possible. This also includes the items in the next verse, such as recreation. Thus, it should be understood that a person who has too much recreation unfavorable to yoga or too little recreation unfavorable to yoga cannot be a yogi, and that a person with too much or too little action cannot be a yogi. Regulation of diet and sleep is recommended herein for the yogis. Too much eating means eating more than is required to keep the body and soul together. There is no need for men to eat animals because there is an ample supply of grain, vegetables, fruits, and milk. Such simple food stuff is considered to be in the mode of goodness according to the Bhagavad Gita. So, to stick to Dietary restrictions is what is referred to here. Anyone who goes beyond that is considered to be eating too much. Animal food is for those in the mode of ignorance. Therefore, those who indulge in animal food, drinking, smoking, and eating food, which is not first offered to Krishna, will suffer sinful reactions because of eating only polluted things. Bhunjate akham papa ye pachantyatma karanam. Anyone who eats for sense pleasure or cooks for himself, not offering his food to Krishna, eats only sin. These are all common practices amongst the transcendentalists, that you offer foodstuffs to Lord Vishnu. You offer offerable foodstuffs to Lord Vishnu and you take it. This is a bona fide, I'm talking of bona fide practitioners of the Jnana, Yoga, and Bhakti systems. One who eats sin and eats more than is allotted to him cannot execute perfect yoga. It is best that one eat only the remnants of foodstuff offered to Krishna. A person in Krishna consciousness does not eat anything which is not first offered to Krishna. Therefore, only the Krishna conscious person can attain perfection in yoga practice. Nor can one who artificially abstains from eating, manufacturing his own personal process of fasting, practice yoga. The Krishna conscious person observes fasting as it is recommended in the scriptures. He does not fast or eat more than is required, and he is thus competent to perform yoga practice. One who eats more than required will dream very much while sleeping, and he must consequently sleep more than is required. One should not sleep more than 6 hours daily. These are all restrictions for the yogis, strict transcendentalists. They accept these restrictions. One who sleeps more than 6 hours out of 24 is certainly influenced by the mode of ignorance. A person in the mode of ignorance is lazy and prone to sleep a great deal. Such a person cannot perform yoga. Even the recreation that Sri Baladev Vidyabhushan is referring to, it is only simple. It is not talking about the recreation that we understand in the modern world. It is recreation which is acceptable to the practice of yoga. So he will never lose his focus. He will never lose. In the yoga texts, one comes across further information. What is accepted? I think yogis are allowed to walk a little bit. There's something in there. I don't remember. Something is there.
Bhakti is decreasing in walking.
Decreasing in
Walking is the recreation for yogis.
Walking is a recreation for yogis. Bhakti comes on. Because the yoga text, there's a description. It's a complete system. No? So the Yoga Sutras and all that, they have a lot of discussion about it. Okay, text 17.
He who is regulated in his habit of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system.
For one with regulated eating and recreation, with controlled actions of the sense organs such as speaking, related to spiritual and mundane duties, with regulated sleeping and waking, yoga destroys all suffering. Therefore, the yogi will conduct himself in that way. Prabhupada, extravagance in the matter of eating, sleeping, defending, and mating, which are demands of the body, can block advancement in the practice of yoga. First of all, this is just a general description about all spiritual practice. As long as we think we should have an enhanced version of Ahara Nidra Bhaya Maithuna, then we are automatically disqualified. For Ashtanga Yoga itself, one has to be absolutely celibate. So Maithuna has to be given up, absolutely. Even on both external, all sexual activity has to be given up. Even on the thinking platform. As far as eating is concerned, it can be regulated only when one has practiced to take and accept prasadam, sanctified food. Lord Krishna is offered, according to the Bhagavad Gita, vegetables, flowers, fruits, grains, milk, etc. In this way, a person in Krishna consciousness becomes automatically trained not to accept food not meant for human consumption or not in the category of goodness. The number of devotees are quite especially from the West, who are used to more sattvic foodstuffs. When they come to India, they get quite annoyed because we eat all kinds of, spicy food, something like that. And I myself have come across devotees who directly on the face they tell brahmachari kitchen. I remember they would just directly tell, this is not prasad. Directly they would say it's not prasad. And then if you ask why, they'll start quoting verses from Bhagavad Gita. Say 17th chapter, there's a description. No? There are 7 factors or something based on which Krishna classifies. These are sattvic foodstuffs. In the Sri Vaishnava line also, they have, I've noticed the Tamil, ancient Tamil manual on Ahara Niyama, restrictions in eating. Really written by Vedanta Deshika. I saw an English translation of it also. A little bit shocking for us because many foodstuffs are forbidden for us. So many things are forbidden. If you have surrendered unto the Supreme Lord, then you have to avoid foodstuffs which are not in the mode of goodness. There are certain foods which, under certain combinations, would be in the mode of goodness. Very important, actually. If our foodstuffs agitate us, it becomes a bigger issue. Our mind itself is giving disturbance, then why should the cook's mind also give us disturbance? Be careful about this. Gradually, we get used to it. As far as sleeping is concerned, a Krishna conscious person is always alert in the discharge of his duties in Krishna consciousness, and therefore any unnecessary time spent sleeping is considered a great loss. Avyartha kalatvam, a Krishna conscious person cannot bear to pass a minute of his life without being engaged in the service of the Lord. Therefore, his sleeping is kept to a minimum. His ideal in this respect is Srila Rupa Goswami, who was always engaged in the service of Krishna and who could not sleep more than 2 hours a day, and sometimes not even that. Thakur Haridas would not even accept prasadam, nor even sleep for a moment without finishing his daily routine of chanting with his beads 300,000 names, 192 rounds. Prabhupada explained it took him 16 hours. And this was when he was preaching, when he was a Goshtyananda Acharya preaching. At that time, he was chanting 192 rounds. Later on, I don't know how much he was chanting. When he was retired by Lord Chaitanya's order, when he had retired at Siddhabakul in Jagannath Puri, the Lord told him to sit and chant. So I don't know how much he would have chanted, more than that. But when he was preaching, he was chanting 192 rounds per day. As far as work is concerned, a Krishna conscious person does not do anything which is not connected with Krishna's interest, and thus his work is always regulated and is untainted by sense gratification. Since there's no question of sense gratification, there's no material leisure for a person in Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada has actually placed sports as something to be avoided by. It's a matter of surprise. See, there's a notice that Prabhupada had put out in, I think, New York, in which he stated that I don't have it. But there he specifies sports is to be avoided. I mean, basically, if you are very serious about going back to God in one lifetime, then you have to be having airtight practice of Krishna consciousness. Since there's no question of sense gratification, there's no material leisure for a person in Krishna consciousness. These are all very difficult observances, very difficult practices. We don't deny it also. The faster we want to make spiritual progress, the more difficult it is. So we need to find out what we need to do to make it easy. When we increase our engagement in the direct activities of bhakti, then we develop a taste for it. Like when we can increase our chanting, we can increase our reading. There are devotees who loudly read from Prabhupada's books. And Keshav Bharati Maharaj, who is promoting it, he says that ever since I started loudly reading Prabhupada's books, this is Shravanam Kirtanam also. He says, I become as enthusiastic as a new bhakta. I feel like doing everything. And because he is regulated in all his work, speech, sleep, wakefulness, and all other bodily activities, there is no material misery for him. He conducts all these loud reading sessions, 5 hours a day. Devotees get together, and different devotees read. One devotee may read for 1 hour, another devotee another hour. No questions, no answers, no discussion, nothing, just here. And nobody should go to sleep. Everyone should be awake. That's how they practice. Once a year they do in different places, like in Govardhan. They take a Prabhupada's books. Achintya Chaitanya Prabhu told me, one of my friends, that there's a disciple of Devamrita Maharaj who has read all of Prabhupada's books 3 times within 4 years through this method. Even some loud reading group, all of Prabhupada's books. So when some reference comes and somebody asks, where is this stated? Immediately you say, this is Bhagavata 4th canto. This is coming in, Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is coming in teaching for Lord Chaitanya. Brahmacharis, they have that facility. They can study. Okay, let's move on. Text 18.
Yada vidyatam chitam atmane evavastistate niskriya sabhakamebhya yukta itucchate tada. When the yogi, a practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, is said to be well established in yoga.
So when will that person become accomplished in yoga? When the consciousness of the person practicing yoga always remains firmly situated only in his own self, being fully under his control, and the mind and the person is devoid of all desires other than to realize the self, then his yoga practice is said to be complete. When functions of consciousness are restrained, when consciousness gives up absorption in matter and becomes fixed completely in spiritual objects or Atma Tattva, then the person devoid of material karma, material passion, becomes absorbed in yoga. Now he is called Yuktaha. Yukta, you see the word Yukta. Yukta ityuchyate tata. Well situated in yoga. The activities of the yogi are distinguished from those of the ordinary person by his characteristic cessation from all kinds of material desires of which sex is the chief. A perfect yogi is so well disciplined in the activities of the mind that he can no longer be disturbed by any kind of material desire. In other words, a yogi is not just a person who's externally controlling his body and mind. He has reached a particular status that spontaneously these things happen. Just does not have all these material desires that disturb him. Within devotion service, from Shraddha to Prema, that also the same thing comes at a later point. For those who are practicing devotional service, they will also develop detachment and realization. And at a certain point, their mind also becomes spontaneously attracted to Krishna. Right now, or I can say, prior to Anartha Nivriti, our mind is not directly attached to Krishna. It's attached to Maya. But then at a certain point, then we start becoming attached to Krishna. That is after Nishtha. This perfection stage can automatically be attained by persons in Krishna consciousness, as stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Savai Manah Krishna Padaravindayo Vachamsi Vaikuntha Gunanu Varnane Karo Harer Mandir Margan Adishu Tutim Chakarat Hitasat Katkodaye Mukunda Lingalaya Darshine Drishau Tadhritya Katra Sparshinga Sangamam Granam Chitatpada Saroja Saurabhe Srimat Tulasya Rasanam Tadarpite Pado Hare Kshetra Padanu Sarpane Shiro Rishikesha Padabhi Vandane Kamam Chadasye Natukama Kamyaya Yathottama Shloka Janashraya Ratihi. King Ambarish first of all engaged his mind on the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Then one after another he engaged his words in describing the transcendental qualities of the Lord, his hands in mopping the temple of the Lord, his ears in hearing of the activities of the Lord, his eyes in seeing the transcendental forms of the Lord, his body in touching the bodies of the devotees, his sense of smell in smelling the scents of the lotus flowers offered to the Lord, his tongue in tasting the tulasi leaf offered at the lotus feet of the Lord, his legs in going to places of pilgrimage and the temple of the Lord, his head in offering obeisances unto the Lord, his desires in executing the mission of the Lord. All these transcendental activities are quite befitting a pure devotee. See, this Navavida Bhakti is considered so important in the practice of Bhakti Yoga that a number of books have been written on each of these items. I mean, complete book dealing with all of this. There is one book named Haribhakti Kalpalatika, discovered by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Sanskrit book, we don't know who wrote it. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur translated it into Bengali. Bhaktivinoda Thakur just published it without translation. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur also liked it. He translated it into Bengali. Now we have English translations. One chapter for each item. Very clear detail. This is Shravana. This is Kirtana. This is Svara. Clear detailed exposition. There is one compilation called Bhakti Ratnavali. Let's see if I... No, I don't have it here. That is also a very interesting compilation. Compilation of verses from Srimad Bhagavatam. One Vishnu Puri wrote it. He is a predecessor of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Vaishnava. So he made a compilation. That is also a very nice compilation. Shravana, verses related to Shravana, verses related to Kirtana, verses related to Smarana and so on. Very, very nice. Considered very, very important. Because if we are not having a clear understanding of this, then we will not be able to execute it also. Let me have a look at 9.4. 18 to 20, that is this. Maharaj Ambarish always engaged his mind in meditating upon the lotus feet of Krishna. His words in describing the glories of the Lord, his hands in cleansing the Lord's temple, his ears in hearing the words spoken by Krishna or about Krishna. He engaged his eyes in seeing the deity of Krishna, Krishna's temples and Krishna's places like Mathura and Vrindavan. He engaged his sense of touch in touching the bodies of the Lord's devotees. He engaged his sense of smell in smelling the fragrance of tulasi offered to the Lord, and he engaged his tongue in tasting the Lord's prasad. He engaged his legs in walking to the holy places and temples of the Lord, his head in bowing down before the Lord, and all his desires in serving the Lord 24 hours a day. Indeed, Maharaj Ambarish never desired anything for his own sense gratification. He engaged all his senses in devotion service, in various engagements related to the Lord. This is the way to increase attachment for the Lord and be completely free from all material desires. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord recommends Maya Sakta Manah Partha Yogam Yunjan Madashraya. This indicates that one must execute devotional service under the guidance of a devotee or directly under the guidance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is not possible, however, to train oneself without guidance from the spiritual master. In other words, if one is fortunate like Lord Brahma, then the Supreme Lord, Lord Vishnu himself becomes the Guru. Otherwise, one needs to take guidance from a Vaishnava Guru. Therefore, according to the instructions of Srila Rupa Goswami, the first business of a devotee is to accept a bona fide spiritual master who can train him to engage his various senses in rendering transcendental service to the Lord. Is there any verse in Guru Ashtaka that tells us how the Guru trains his disciples? How does it? So what does he say there?
This is Ila from videos
So he is engaged in these activities and he makes the devotees also engage in these activities. He trains them in various items of devotional service. The Lord also says in Bhagavad Gita, Samshayam samagram mam yatha gyasyasi takshranu. In other words, if one wants to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead in completeness, one must follow the prescriptions given by Krishna by following in the footsteps of Maharaj Ambarish. It is said, Rishikena Rikesha Sevanam Bhakti Uchate. Bhakti means to engage the senses in the service of the master of the senses, Krishna, who is called Rishikesha or Achyuta. These words are used in these verses. Achyuta Satkathodaye, Rishikesha Padabhi Vandane. The words Achyuta and Rishikesha are also used in Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is Krishna Katha spoken directly by Krishna. And Srimad Bhagavatam is also Krishna Katha because everything described in the Bhagavatam is a relationship with Krishna. So, this is a good example of Bahuangashraya Bhakti. These books should be translated. The really good contribution. This is only the Sanskrit, but at least you get to see proper verses. Bhagavatam became very, very popular by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time. Haribhakti Kalpalatika. Haribhakti Kalpalatika is here. Haribhakti Kalpalatika. So each chapter deals with one item. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedam. This is not introduction. Really nice book. It's one thing which I wanted. Okay, the two verses which I'll just read out. This verse. Punyam Bhudi Bhava Pamo Vidhatini Satsanga Mulottama Shraddha Pallavini Virakti Kalika Prema Prasuno Jwala Sandrananda Prasavaham Chaparamam Jnanam Phalam Vidhalati Seyam Shri Hari Bhakti Kalpalatika Bhuyat Satam Pritaye. May this book, Shri Hari Bhakti Kalpalatika, the wish-fulfilling creeper of devotional service to Lord Hari, increase the pleasure of the saintly devotees. Born from the ocean of piety, Punya, it destroys illusion, gives good association. No. It is excellent because of the root of satsanga. It is based on good association. Bestows spiritual knowledge of eternal bliss and is filled with twigs of faith, buds of renunciation, and fully blossomed flowers of love of God. Another verse. That's very, very nice. Where is it? One thing we understand how much they have analyzed the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam in so many ways. Where's mine? Okay, here it is. Tatrado paralokato bhayamatah punye matir jayate sambhedas tateeva sadhushu bhavet tesham prasado dayat shraddha syad bhagavat kathasu chatato bhaktir viraktis tatas tattva jnanam amanda sandra paramanandam samudyo tate. When people become afraid of their destination after death, they take to pious activities. Then they associate with the devotees of the Lord. By the mercy and association of devotees, they develop faith in the topics of the Supreme Lord. From faith, they obtain devotion service to the Lord. From devotion service, renunciation automatically follows, and from renunciation, auspicious, ecstatic, spiritual knowledge manifests. So here, these are the different stages. This is a general pathway. The general pathway of Sadharana Pratha is this. First of all, the people need to develop some fear about the punishments that they will attain in their next life for engaging in sinful activities. It is only then they will take to pious activities. So after they take to pious activities means that after they accept Vedic authority, then there is the possibility that they may associate with sadhus in the appropriate manner. And then by their mercy, one gets Shraddha. Shraddha in the topics of Bhagavan. Then one engages in Bhakti, Bhajana Kriya. Then he develops Virakti, renunciation, detachment, anartha-nivritti, and so on. Then he attains spiritual knowledge, concentrated, which is concentrated bliss. Then that shines. In Bhava Bhakti, one directly receives that. This is also very nice. Very good. This transcendental stage may be inexpressible subjectively by the followers of the impersonalist path, but it becomes very easy and practical for a person in Krishna consciousness, as is apparent in the above description of the engagements of Maharaj Ambarish. Unless the mind is fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord by constant remembrance, such transcendental engagements are not practical. In the devotional service of the Lord, therefore, these prescribed activities are called archana, or engaging all the senses in the service of the Lord. The senses and the mind require engagements. Simple abnegation is not practical. Therefore, for people in general, especially those who are not in the renounced order of life, transcendental engagement of the senses and the mind, as described above, is a perfect process for the transcendental achievement, which is called yukta in the Bhagavad Gita. So the effect of Ashtanga Yoga can be achieved within Bhakti also. Same detachment, same realization can be achieved. In Bhakti Yoga, there's a method of using the senses also. In Ashtanga Yoga, one restrains the senses. And it's mainly mind predominant. But in Bhakti Yoga, one can utilize the senses also. In deity worship, we are trained to utilize all the senses. That can be utilized. Okay, text 19.
Yatadipo nivatastu nenagate sapoma smita yogina yata tripostya yato yogam atmanam. A lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self.
How do we describe that perfected yogi? The flame in a windless place does not flicker, but remains glowing. Those knowledgeable of yoga consider that flame to be exactly similar to the meditating yogi. What is it similar to? It is similar to the yogi whose internal functions have been completely stopped, who performs meditation on the Atma. This yogi, whose knowledge has awakened, whose internal functions have ceased in relation to all objects except for the soul, meaning except self-realization, is similar to a motionless, glowing flame. So this is not a flickering flame. This is a steady flame, not moving here and there. It's very consciousness is controlled. A truly Krishna conscious person, always absorbed in transcendence, in constant, undisturbed meditation on his worshipable Lord, is as steady as a lamp in a windless place. So in India, they more or less expect that the more we shout and scream at them for different things, the more they expect us to be like this. What is this? So disturbed. We're not giving you food. We're not giving you some tasty food. You get so angry. You'll simply be finding fault. That's all. There's a reason to it because there's so much of description Krishna has given. In Srimad Bhagavatam, we have even more descriptions. Okay, next.
Yatra paranate chitam bodham yoga sevaya yatra chayatmanatmanam pasyanatmani tushyati sopramadhyam chitam yatra vidhya nachindriyam yetya yatra nachayvayam stirattvavati tattvataha yam labdva chaparam labham nityam tataha yasmin spito na dukkhena gurunapi vichayate in the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact.
In 3.5 verses, the Lord now describes the qualities of samadhi in terms of its swarup, of its nature, and its results. Samadhi is indicated by the word yoga, which has been mentioned starting with verse 16. The repeated use of the word yat refers to Tam Vidyad Yoga Sangeetam. Know that this is called yoga in verse 23. By the practice of samadhi, the consciousness, ceasing any other function, enjoys great bliss. In that state, seeing the soul by the purified mind, he is satisfied in that soul. Rather than seeing his body using his contaminated mind, and being satisfied with material sense objects. In other words, this person, he is now able to see the soul itself. Typically, all conditioned souls, our senses are covered by the subtle body, and the subtle body is covered with the gross body. So we can only see through that. But once one comes to this point, then he is able to actually see himself. He's able to see that he is covered with a subtle body and a gross body and so on. Here, yoga or samadhi is described by the desirable result which is attained, the bliss, and by its essential nature, complete cessation of internal functions in relation to material sense objects. In that state of samadhi, he experiences that perfect state of Brahman, which is everlasting bliss. State of Brahman means state of Paramatma, supreme, the super soul. A bliss comprehended by the intelligence of the Atma, Buddhi Grahya. So this is the intelligence of the Atma. This is not the material intelligence. Buddhi Grahyam Atindriyam, devoid of relation with the senses and sense objects. Therefore, situated in that way, he does not deviate from the Swarup of the Atma at all. He doesn't deviate from his self-realization. Having attained that Samadhi, he does not think that anything else additionally needs to be attained. Situated in that yoga, he is not disturbed by great causes of grief, such as death of a son endowed with good qualities. So he is not bothered when there is some calamity. He is not, in other words, he doesn't stop his practice. He doesn't stop his practice. Know that what destroys the connection with sorrow to be yoga or samadhi. In the initial state, that yoga should be performed with the conviction that if I make great effort, I will succeed. This will come. Okay, let me read it anyway. It should be performed with a heart devoid of despair, which thinks it is impossible for me to do this. In other words, it should be performed with enthusiasm, like the bird who attempted to dry up the ocean which stole her eggs. We will come to this. This purport is there is a purport given by Bhakti also. All of this requires some clarification. By such practice of yoga, the consciousness is withdrawn from material objects, becoming indifferent to those objects. Then one becomes situated in samadhi. In that state, seeing Paramatma by the antahkarana. Antahkarana means the inner sense. It is a technical word referring to the mind. In that state, seeing the Paramatma by the antahkarana, which has the form of Paramatma, one experiences happiness arising from that. In other words, that mind itself is energized by Paramatma. The Darshan scripture, the philosophical scripture written by sage Patanjali, is a scripture concerning pure Ashtanga Yoga. Not understanding its real meaning, the commentators explain as follows. The followers of Vedanta say that Atma, in its nature of knowledge and bliss, is liberation. This is illogical because if one is aware of bliss in the state of oneness, there will be destruction of oneness by duality in the form of knowledge and an object of knowledge. There is this concept. That is the process of knowing anything. Now, when I know something, that is the knower. The object of knowledge. I am the subject of knowledge. That is the object of knowledge. And that is knowledge. So now, that is the Kevaladvaita group of Vedanta philosophers, as well as most of the yoga philosophers also. They think, no, at some point, all these three will merge into one. So there's no distinction between the object of knowledge, subject of knowledge, and so on. So they think that if you say that the spirit soul itself is conscious of itself, then you are saying that the soul is both the subject and object of knowledge, which means that there is a distinction. Because the soul is seeing himself, the soul sees that he is not the body, he sees that he is not the mind. So in other words, he is able to see there is knowledge with subject of knowledge, objects of knowledge. Okay. So these commentators, they say, no, it is not like this. But Patanjali does not say this. He simply says in the scripture he has written, Purushartha Shunyanam Pratiprasava Kaivalya Swarupa Pratishtha. Va Chiti Shakti Riti. Liberation is extinction of the gunas in the form of the human goals, or it is consciousness established in itself. When all the gunas are devoid of the purusharthas of dharma, the kama and moksha, they do not create momentary transformations. Then kaivalya or oneness of spiritual qualities manifest. By that, there is establishment, pratishtha of the swarupa of the jiva. That is called Chitti Shakti. If one looks deeply, Patanjali does not accept destructions of Atma's qualities in the final state. He only accepts an unchanging state of all the qualities. One should understand that Chitti Shakti means spiritual qualities. When the unchanging nature is established, the qualities of the Swarup manifest. The condition of Atma in combination with Prakriti is called Atma Guna Vikar. Transformation of the soul's attributes. He does not teach that when that disappears, Atma Shakti, Atma Guna, or the Dharma of the Atma, which is bliss, also disappears. In the stage of liberation which is described, bliss devoid of material transformations is awakened. This bliss is the swarupa of happiness. That is final result of yoga. It will be shown later that this is called Bhakti. There are two types of samadhi. Sampragyata and asampragyata. Sampragyata samadhi. These are all very common within the world of the yoga system. Sampragyata samadhi has many varieties such as savitarka, savichara, etc. Samadhi in which there is still some intellectual deliberation and so on. Asampragyata samadhi has only one type. In this asampragyata samadhi, there is attainment of intense happiness devoid of contact with material senses, perceived by the intelligence in the form of Atma. The consciousness of the yogi situated in pure happiness of Atma does not divert from this tattva, truth, any longer. If the jiva cannot attain this state, the jiva has no auspiciousness in Ashtanga Yoga. Or when he becomes attracted to whatever intermediate results in the form of powers, powers means yoga siddhis, he deviates from the happiness of samadhi, which is the final goal of the yogi's heart. There is fear of inauspiciousness in practicing yoga from these obstacles. But there is no fear like this in Bhakti Yoga. This will later be explained. In other words, Ashtanga Yoga itself can produce results which tempt you. Tempt you. The yoga siddhis that come up, it can be a cause of great distraction. Strictly speaking, Bhakti Yoga also it comes. When you study Madhurya Kadambini, at one point, Vishwanath Chakravarti says that there are anarthas which are caused by Bhakti itself. Bhakti itself causes certain unwanted attitudes, unwanted desires, unwanted activities, and so on. It's like, let's go back to that example of the creeper given by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Rupa Goswami. You're pouring water. Pouring the water is comparable to engagement in Shravanam, Kirtanam, and so on. But when we pour water on the creeper, by default, the weeds grow. So in that way, Bhakti is now nourishing. Sometimes this question is asked. This devotee, even before he took to Krishna consciousness, he had certain good qualities. He never had certain bad qualities. Now, after he took to Krishna consciousness, he's exhibiting so many bad qualities which he never, even before, he never had. So what is going on? What is going on? There's weeds. There's all these weeds. Because he's chanting, he's doing devotion, so he's serving his guru, serving the Vaishnava, serving Krishna, and all these things. Pouring more and more and more water. So the weeds are growing very nicely. The weeds become very prominent. So that kind of distraction is there. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also says, while discussing, I think Archanability or Nishtha, Madhuri Kadambini, he says that when one does devotion service, then initially he will gain many material benefits, what we refer to as Janam, Janam, Sundarim, and all of that will come. So that is also coming because of engagement in bhakti. But we should not be distracted by these kind of things. Ashtanga Yoga also, that is there. But in Ashtanga Yoga, it is extraordinary. You develop some, suddenly you realize you can disappear in one place, appear in another. In Bhakti Yoga, we don't have this kind of problem. It is too much now. By chanting Hare Krishna itself, you get these kind of mystic powers. Prabhupada says that it is not surprising. Mystic powers also come at a later point, but not in this frightening manner. This is a very frightening manner. It's a little bit more dangerous. The yogi does not think there is any happiness superior to the happiness attained in samadhi. Thus, while maintaining his body, all the temporary happiness that arises by contact of the senses with sense objects is accepted only for maintaining the body by considering that as insignificant. In other words, one does not increase one's bodily necessities. One considers one's bodily necessities to be insignificant. So he starts to minimize it. The time is going away. He should be engaged in his yoga practice. So to maintain the body, infrastructural maintenance is taking more time, means he becomes disturbed. Tolerating all the great sufferings such as accidents, pain, lack, and death, he enjoys the happiness of samadhi which he seeks. Afflicted by all the suffering, he does not give up the highest happiness. He practices yoga with firm determination that all the suffering that has come will not last very long and that it will quickly disappear. He does not give up the practice of yoga with useless regret that there is delay in attaining the result of yoga because of some obstacle. In other words, he has great determination till attaining the result of yoga. The first action related to yoga is that all the senses should be completely controlled by yama, niyama, asana, pranayama. First 4 steps of Ashtanga Yoga. And by the mind, after having removed completely the desires born from determination to attain results. Pratyahara is teaching detachment gradually by, it's not just teaching detachment, it is cultivation of detachment. Gradually by intelligence attained from an anga in the form of dharana. Controlling the mind completely by dhyana, dharana, and pratyahara, he will attain atma samadhi. He will not think of material sense objects any longer. And though thinking of sense objects for maintaining the body, he will not become attached to them. This has been taught. This is the inner action of yoga. Prabhupada. By practice of yoga, one becomes gradually detached from material concepts. Material concepts such as, I must enjoy this world. This world is meant for my enjoyment. I can utilize it. I can derive happiness from it and so on. Chitta vritti nirodha yoga. Yoga is to get free from these mental concepts. This is the primary characteristic of the yoga principle. After this, one becomes situated in trance or samadhi, which means that the yogi realizes the super soul through transcendental mind and intelligence, without any of the misgivings of identifying the self with the super self. So first he identifies himself. He realizes himself. Then he realizes the supreme self. Yoga practice is more or less based on the principles of the Patanjali system. Some unauthorized commentators try to identify the individual soul with the super soul. And the monists think this to be liberation, but they do not understand the real purpose of the Patanjali system of yoga. There is an acceptance of transcendental pleasure in the Patanjali system, but the monists do not accept this transcendental pleasure out of fear of jeopardizing the theory of oneness. The theory of oneness is this idea that jnana, jnaya, jnata, everything should be merged. Triputi vinash. These 3 features should be this 3-part system of knowledge should be destroyed. That is our goal. The duality of knowledge and knower is not accepted by the non-dualists, but in this verse, transcendental pleasure realized through transcendental senses is accepted. Realized through transcendental senses comes in the translation. If you look at the word meanings, then you see sukham, happiness, atyantikam, supreme happiness, yat, which, that, tat, that supreme happiness, which, buddhi, by intelligence, grahyam, accessible, which is accessible by intelligence. So now this intelligence is not part of the material system because next word, atindriya, transcendental, beyond the senses. It is beyond the senses. When we talk about the senses, we are not just talking about the physical senses. We are actually talking about the subtle senses. In a dream, we talk and we walk and we run. So we have karmendriyas, gyanendriyas, everything in the dream. That means it is a subtle body. So these are the subtle senses. And the very fact that the living entity can grasp, can grasp supreme happiness or transcendental happiness through intelligence, which is beyond the senses, indicates it's beyond the subtle body. So in other words, the soul has its own intelligence. And this is corroborated by Patanjali Muni, the famous exponent of the yoga system. The great sage declares in his Yoga Sutras, Purushartha Shunyanam Gunanam Pratiprasava Kaivalyam Surupa Pratishtha Chiti Shakti. This Chiti Shakti or internal potency is transcendental. Purushartha means material religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and at the end, the attempt to become one with the Supreme. This oneness with the Supreme is called Kaivalyam by the monist. But according to Patanjali, this Kaivalyam is an internal or transcendental potency by which the living entity becomes aware of his constitutional position. In the words of Lord Chaitanya, this state of affairs is called Chetodarpana Marjan, or clearance of the impure mirror of the mind. This clearance is actually liberation, or Bhavamaha Davalgu Nirvapana. In Shikshashtakam, we come across 7 features of Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. Each of them happens step by step. Bhaktivinoda Thakur has nicely described it in his commentary. 7 steps. The theory of nirvana, also preliminary, corresponds with this principle. In the Bhagavatam, this is called Swarupena Vyavasthiti. The Bhagavad Gita also confirms the situation in this verse. After nirvana, there is manifestation of spiritual activities or devotional service to the Lord known as Krishna consciousness. In the words of the Bhagavatam, Swarupena Vyavasthiti. This is the real life of the living entity. Maya or illusion is a condition of spiritual life contaminated by material infection. Liberation from this material infection does not mean destruction of the original eternal position of the living entity. Patanjali also accepts this by his words, Kaivalyam Swarupa Pratishtha Chiti Shakti. This Chiti Shakti or transcendental pleasure is real life. This is confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra. Anandamayo Bhyasa. Anandamayo Bhyasa actually refers to the Supreme Brahman. But the living entities have been also described as being qualitatively one with the Supreme Being. So the Supreme Being is Vibhu Anandamaya, and then the living entity could be accepted as Anu Anandamaya. Tiny, but nevertheless Anandamaya. This natural transcendental pleasure is the ultimate goal of yoga and is easily achieved by execution of devotion service or Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga will be vividly described in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. In the yoga system as described in this chapter, there are 2 kinds of samadhi called Sampragyata Samadhi and Asampragyata Samadhi. When one becomes situated in the transcendental position by various philosophical researchers, he is said to have achieved Sampragyata Samadhi. In other words, his material intelligence is still working. It is still deliberating, and with the force of intelligence, he is now engaged in the stage of Samadhi. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. Okay. One comes to a point of uninterrupted meditation with realization, but he is propelling himself to do it using his intelligence, material intelligence. That is in Sampragyata Samadhi. In the Asampragyata Samadhi, there is no longer any connection with mundane pleasure, for one is then transcendental to all sorts of happiness derived from the senses. When the yogi is once situated in that transcendental position, that means once he has attained Asampragyata Samadhi, 2nd stage of Samadhi, he is never shaken from it. Until then, he can be shaken. Until he attains the 2nd stage of Samadhi. Unless the yogi is able to reach this position, he is unsuccessful. Today's so-called yoga practice, which involves various sense pleasures, is contradictory. A yogi indulging in sex and intoxication is a mockery. Means you're just making fun of the yoga system. Even those yogis who are attracted by the siddhis, perfections in the process of yoga, are not perfectly situated. If the yogis are attracted by byproducts of yoga, then they cannot attain the stage of perfection as stated in this verse. Persons therefore indulging in the make-show practice of gymnastic feats or siddhis should know that the aim of yoga is lost in that way. The best practice of yoga in this age is Krishna consciousness, which is not baffling. A Krishna conscious person is so happy in his occupation that he does not aspire after any other happiness. There are many impediments, especially in this age of hypocrisy, to practicing Hatha Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. But there is no such problem in executing Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. Karma Yoga is preliminary to Bhakti Yoga in the fastest method of spiritual progress. In other processes from Karma Yoga, you have to go to Jnana Yoga and then go to Bhakti Yoga. Or you have to go to from Karma Yoga to Jnana Yoga to Ashtanga Yoga and then come to Bhakti Yoga. And then come to pure Bhakti Yoga. As long as the material body exists, one has to meet the demands of the body, namely eating, sleeping, defending, and mating. Prabhupada generally refers to bhaya in ahar, nidra, bhaya, maituna as in defending, because out of fear, you engage in that activity of defending. So when that fearing goes away, then the defending also goes away. Prabhupada also explains why the 6 Goswamis were not engaged in ahar, nidra, bhaya, maituna. Although maituna is given up. But then how come they gave up fear? And then Prabhupada says, because they took shelter of Krishna. And Krishna is very powerful to give all protection. So then you come to the point when you realize you don't need to protect yourself. Krishna is there to protect you. It's like a child who has absolute faith in the father. He will protect me. I don't need to protect myself. That is his duty, not my duty. But a person who is in pure Bhakti Yoga or in Krishna consciousness does not arouse the senses while meeting the demands of the body. So he does not agitate the senses while fulfilling the demands of the body. He does not agitate the body. Rather, he accepts the bare necessities of life, making the best use of a bad bargain, and enjoys transcendental happiness in Krishna consciousness. He is callous means indifferent towards incidental occurrences such as accidents, disease, scarcity, and even the death of a most dear relative. But he's always alert to executing his duties in Krishna consciousness or Bhakti Yoga. There was a time in ISKCON when the temple resident devotees, when let us say their mother died or some father died, they would be afraid to cry. Prabhupada says here, to be careless. But it was expected that you're not paranoid about all these things. Prabhupada had established these standards. When one of his disciples, Swarup Damodar, who later became Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, when his mother died, or somebody died, one of his family members died, I don't remember who. Then he asked Prabhupada, and he was with Prabhupada, I think in Vidvan. He asked Prabhupada, what should I do? And Prabhupada quoted that verse. Is that you are constantly engaged in carrying out the activities of devotional service according to my instructions. So you don't need to go. Prabhupada established that standard, high standard. But he's always alert to execute his duties in Krishna consciousness or Bhakti Yoga. Accidents never deviate him from his duty, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Agama Payano Nityas, Tam Stitikshasva Bharat. He endures all such incidental occurrences because he knows that they come and go and do not affect his duties. In this way, he achieves the highest perfection in yoga practice. So, in all the systems, you will notice, in Jnana Yoga, in Dhyana Yoga, and in Bhakti Yoga, there is a certain focus. The focus is greater in Jnana Yoga. Even greater than that is the focus in Ashtanga Yoga. And the focus in proper execution of Bhakti Yoga is also even greater than that. So, those of us who come and say, come on, don't be fanatic. You should learn to be Cool. See the world, open your eyes, come to reality. Don't be just stuck inside your own world. That means they're not interested in becoming a transcendentalist. Because a transcendentalist is interested in spiritual realization. He's not even interested in this happiness. In fact, a proper karmi is not even interested in the gross human world. He wants to go to the heavenly world. So he's not even bothered about all the miseries that are experienced by human beings. His mind is already fixed somewhere else. And he is just getting ready for that. So if that is the case with a proper karmi, then a proper jnani would be interested in Brahman realization. He's only calculating, am I going forward or backward? So that would be the case for Ashtanga Yogi. He's also interested in realizing Paramatma. He's also thinking whether I'm going forward or backward. So Bhakti Yogi also will be thinking the same way. I need to know, I need to attain Bhagwan realization. Bhagwan realization is part of Prema Bhakti. Whether I'm going forward or backward. So in strict Bhakti Yoga, there is a lot of careful consideration. In Upadeshamrita, we get a clear picture of the practice of Bhakti Yoga that is expected of us, especially for track 3. Those who are very serious about track 3, they will naturally find the system given by Rupa Goswami. Track 2 also. Okay, text 24.
Sanishena Yoktabyo Yogo Pamyatipata Sankalpa Prabhavanitavam Tyagva Sarvam Asheshata Manasa Vrindriya Ramam Viniyamya Samantata. One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with determination and faith and not be deviated from the path. One should abandon without exception all material desires born of material speculation, mental speculation, and thus control all the senses on all sides of the mind.
In text 24, the preliminary activities in the initial stage of yoga are described. Now Krishna goes back to give focus on the practice. Now while he has already described the goal of yoga, now Krishna goes back in order to give further light. The final actions are described in text 25. One should give up all sense objects which are born from the decision to enjoy certain objects, which are contrary to yoga, along with their vasanas, material propensity. So one should give up the sense objects along with the desire to enjoy them and along with the propensity to desire to enjoy them. One should completely control all the senses by the mind, which is the fault of the sense objects. Prabhupada, the yoga practitioner should be determined and should patiently prosecute the practice without deviation. One should be sure of success at the end and pursue this course with great perseverance, not becoming discouraged if there is any delay in the attainment of success. Success is sure for the rigid practitioner. Regarding Bhakti Yoga, Rupa Goswami says, Utsaha Nishayat Dhairyat Tattat Karma Pravartanat Sangatyagat Satovritte Shadbhir Bhakti Prasiddhyati. One can execute the process of Bhakti Yoga successfully with full-hearted enthusiasm, perseverance, and determination by following the prescribed duties in the association of devotees and by engaging completely in activities of goodness. Satovritte, Prabhupada is translated as engaging completely in activities of goodness. That means whenever you will find in Bhagavad Gita several activities described in terms of goodness, passion, ignorance. So we only accept goodness, we reject passion, and we keep very far away from the ignorance. As for determination, one should follow the example of the sparrow who lost her eggs in the waves of the ocean. Now, this is brought out in greater detail in Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur's explanation. What is this text number? 24. Very interesting. 24. Patra Kachi Akhyayika Asti. In one of the Vedic literature, we come across this history. Kasichit kila pakshinaha andani tirastitani taranga vegena samudraha jahara. There was a bird and it had its eggs on the shore of an ocean. By the force of the waves, the ocean had taken those eggs. Such a samudram Yami, typing mistake. Eva, iti pratigyaya. And then that bird promised that I will certainly dry up this ocean. Declared that. Swamukha agrena ekaikam jalabindu bindum upuri prachikshepa. And then the bird took drop by drop that ocean and started putting it on the shore of the ocean. Katascha sa bahubi pakshibi bandhubi yuktya varyamanaha api naiva uparara. Then various friends, other friend birds, they all came together and they saw this bird and repeatedly they told this bird, don't do these things, it's a waste of time. Don't do these things. But he did not stop. Yadrikshaya tatra agatena naradena vivaritaha api. And then Narada Muni somehow or other came to that place. He also told this bird, don't, you're wasting your time, and so on. Asmin janmani janmantare va samudram shoshishyam yeva iti tad agrevi punah pratijagye. And then that bird, he told the Narada Muni that either in this life or in the next life or in some future life, I will certainly dry up the ocean. And again he made that declaration and promise. Tatascha Daivanukulya. So in this way, by the favor of providence, Kripaluhu Naradaha, Narada Muni, out of compassion, Garudam Tat Sahayaya Preshayamasa. He sent Garuda to assist this bird. Samudras Tvadi Gyati Drohena Tvam Avamanyate iti Vakena Tataha Garuda Paksha Vatena Shushyan. So then Garuda told the deity of the ocean that this is my relative. He's also a bird, I am also a bird. And you are betraying, you are giving trouble to my relative. So you are actually insulting me. So when Garuda told that to the ocean, then with his wings, he started to blow. And in that way, started to dry up the ocean. Samudraha atibhitaha. And then the ocean became very frightened. Tani andani tasmai pakshine dadam. Then he just found the eggs, gave it back to that bird. Evameva, in this way, Shastra Vachana Astikyena Yoge Vyane Mukto Va Pravartamanam Utsahavantam Adhyavasayanam Janam Bhagavaneva Anugrikhnati iti Nishchetavyam. So in this way, it should be understood, ascertained, that for a person who has absolute faith in the statements of scripture and who is engaged in yoga or jnana or bhakti with enthusiasm, with resolute determination, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself personally blesses such a practitioner. That is what is called determined engagement. One should not be bothered, that's all. Everybody will come and tell you, don't do it, it's a waste of time. Even your guru will come and tell you, you're wasting your time. Even everybody will come in this life or any future life. I want what I want, that's all. I don't want anything else. That is determination. And even if one goes through a slower pathway, still the Supreme Lord will help. As for determination, one should follow the example of the sparrow who lost her eggs, his eggs, in the waves of the ocean. A sparrow laid her eggs. Are we talking of a couple? Could be. On the shore of the ocean, but the big ocean carried away the eggs on its waves. The sparrow became very upset and asked the ocean to return her eggs. The ocean did not even consider her appeal. So the sparrow decided to dry up the ocean. She began to pick out the water in a small beak, and everyone laughed at her for her impossible determination. The news of her activity spread, and at last Garuda, the gigantic bird carrier of Lord Vishnu, heard it. He became compassionate toward his small sister bird, and so he came to see the sparrow. Garuda was very pleased by the determination of the small sparrow, and he promised to help. Thus, Garuda at once asked the ocean to return her eggs, lest he himself take up the work of the sparrow. The ocean was frightened at this and returned the eggs. Thus, the sparrow became happy by the grace of Garuda. Similarly, the practice of yoga, especially Bhakti yoga and Krishna consciousness, may appear to be a very difficult job. But if anyone follows the principles with great determination, the Lord will surely help, for God helps those who help themselves. Krishna will come, Krishna will help. All right, we'll stop with that. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Sorry? Bhakti yoga and Krishna. Correct, yeah. Specify. Please share the screen of BVB comment. What is BVB? Baladev Vidya Bhushan commentary. Share the screen. If you share the screen, everyone becomes confused about all the wordings that he uses. So I prefer not to. You get hold of the book. The book is available all over. Get it. In fact, in future batches, I want to not use it all. At this level. Maybe at Bhakti Vedanta level, when we study Bhagavad Gita, we'll use it. Okay, Mataji, one thing before you leave.
Yes,
We're just thinking that from Monday onwards, having 3 2-hour sessions. First session at 7 o'clock, 7 to 9 a.m. Second session 9:45 to 11:45 a.m. Third session 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Is that acceptable to you?
okay, Prabhu. That's okay.
So everything is over by 2 p.m.
Fine, Prabhu. Yeah.
But then we'll have to make a schedule once again, and then we'll publish it.
Fine, Prabhu.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
That's from Monday.